So the question is, where are you when you don't know where you are? I would say you're as close to reality as you're ever going to get when you are where you don't know where you are. And it's a bit much to take. And so people do everything they can all the time to make sure that the amount of reality that they have to come into contact with is delimited, filtered, and controlled. And we do that a bunch of different ways. We do that by organizing our beliefs in a certain way. That's terror management theory, fundamentally, right? Is that we organize our beliefs to shield ourselves from the reality of death. But we also organize our societies and our interpersonal relationships in such a way that we're shielded from death and so that we don't kill each other. And that has nothing to do with the utility of our beliefs in keeping the fear of death at bay. That's something that keeps the lights on and keeps this room warm when it's minus 20 outside. You think, well, here we are in this room and everyone knows what this room is, but it's not the same room if someone pulls out a pistol. It is really not the same place. And insofar as you think it's the same place, all that means is you're in real trouble, because it is not the same place. And so things can shift and change on you all the time, and in fact, to some degree, that's what time is doing. Okay, now, you remember the Osiris-Horus story, right? Okay, so there's Osiris, and Osiris is like, he's like the way things are. Now, there's a problem with that. He's like the map. There's a problem with that, is because the territory is always moving around, and so your map is never quite up to date, and so you can't rely on Osiris. You know that if you have one of those Google GPSs. Now and then they've taken me like to the middle of parking lots. You know, because the map thinks there's something there that isn't there, and there's nothing there. Maybe it's not updated. It wasn't Google, it was the thing that I was using in my car, because Google tends not to do that. But anyways, when the map isn't an accurate representation of the territory, an accurate pragmatic representation of the territory, then you can't navigate in it. And you're going to end up places that you don't understand. So the map gets out of date as the territory changes. So Osiris isn't good enough. The old map never works. It kind of works. And so you need Horus, because Horus is the thing that updates the map. It's like he's attending to those things, he's attending to those locales where the map is no longer valid, and updating it. Now, back to the idea about the things that attract your attention. It was either Binswanger or Boss, and unfortunately I don't remember which because I always confuse the two, existential phenomenological psychologists. And one of them, and I think it was Binswanger, said that reality shines forth, and the other one said, no, no, no. You lay a structure on reality, and the structure is what allows things to shine forth. And it doesn't matter, because you can just put those two theories together. There's something shining in the background, and you have a map that's a filter, and now and then there's a little hole in the map, and you can see the things that are shining through. Those are the things that attract your interest. Now imagine that you have a part of your brain that likes the map and just follows it, and I would say that's the automatized part of you, right? That's the part that's running on algorithms. So when you know a territory, when you're driving home the 100th time, you hardly have to pay attention at all. Because you've paid attention 100 times before. You know the route. You can rely on your pre-existent skills. They're built into you, literally. You've built neurological models of the landscape and the reaction. So here's an example. You know, before you can be a London taxi cab driver, you have to take a test. It takes like 4 years of studying. You have to know the city. And London's a big city. It isn't that you just have to know how to navigate in it, you actually have to sort of memorize the whole damn city. And so they've done scanning studies on people who've done the London cab training process, and what they find is that from the beginning of the 4-year, 3-year, whatever it is, training period to the end, their hippocampi grow. So, why? Well, because they have a big map. It's a bloody big map. It's all of London. You know, so the reason I'm saying that is you don't want to be thinking that when you've learned a route that you've just updated your psyche. You know what I mean? It's not just your abstract conscious mind that knows something. You've built the damn thing right into your body. You've built neural structures. that correspond in some manner, some minimal manner, to the territory itself. And so then you can just run on automatic. And you want to run on automatic because, you know, I bet you've experienced this. You go somewhere for the first time, it's much longer the first time than it is the third time. Have you experienced that? How common is that experience? Put up your hands if you've experienced that. Okay, has people not experienced that? Okay, so I think the reason that is that you're doing there's a lot more neural events going on when you're doing it the first time. And part of your time perception is how many neural events are occurring per fragment of time. And so if a lot of them are happening per fragment of time, the time is going to seem longer. If hardly any of them are happening, it's like you hardly even notice the time. And why should you? There's no point in it. You're running on automatized machinery. So I'll say, well, that's Osiris. Then you have another piece of machinery. That's Horus. That's the thing that attends to those things that the map hasn't covered. And I would say, this is a Jungian idea primarily, although of course Jung extracted it out from all these ancient stories. Where things shine through the map is what attracts your attention. And that tells you whether or not you know it. The map has a hole there. You should fix it. Now, as you fix the hole in the map, you also fix yourself. Because you're building yourself out of information. Now, a corollary of that is, you have a map of the past, your past, and there's holes in it everywhere. And you can tell where those holes are because you can't forget about them. So the hole might be, you got bullied in grade 3 and you were traumatized. It's like, that's a hole in the map. Because you're still that person, unless you've repaired the hole, you're still that person. And that's never going to stop shining through for you unless you go back there and repair it. And what that also means is, imagine that hole, what shines through is horror, in part. It's hard on you, but it's also information. It's information. And the information there would be, how the hell do you deal with a bully? And so maybe you go back and you think about that. You really think through it. And you think, well, how did I get bullied and why did I get bullied? And exactly what it is about human nature that allows someone to be malevolent like that. And what should a person do to defend themselves against that possibility? And how can I become that person? It's like, poof, hole fixed. And what that means in some sense is that you've extracted out the residual information from that occurrence that you hadn't been able to or refused to process when you first had the experience. Now, in your brain, being no stupid thing, it's really concerned about this map. It cares about the map and where things shine through, because it doesn't want you falling through holes. And so, every place that what you don't know shines through is either something you have to attend to now, or something you can't forget. And what you do when you forget something, you don't actually forget it. You learn that it doesn't mean anything anymore because you've mastered it. That's what it is to forget. A traumatized person can't forget because they haven't mastered the territory that constitutes the locale of the trauma. You know, so you might say, well, let's say you're a soldier and you did something seriously brutal in Afghanistan or Vietnam, like seriously brutal. And you can't forget it. What do you do about that? Well, you know, I've dealt with people who've been traumatized in one way or another, sometimes by things they've done and sometimes by things that have happened to them. In order for people to deal with a traumatic event that involved malevolence, they have to develop a theory of good and evil. Because it's the evil and the malevolence that traumatizes them. And I think I've told you already, I had 2 clients who suffered post-traumatic stress disorder because of the way someone looked at them. Once, it was only one time the person looked at them. The other, it was repeated. This is a person who'd been bullied. And it took me a while to figure out that she had post-traumatic stress disorder. But she kept talking about the look on his face. Well, it was an archetypal look, right? It's the look of pure evil, insofar as someone can manifest that look. It's like, you can manifest that look. You know, and if you're a soldier, and you've manifested that spirit, that might be enough to knock out part of your consciousness, right? That's what happens to Horus when he encounters Seth. It's like, uh-oh, eyes open, you encounter something like that, you lose an eye. You pay a price, right? It can damage you because it's so deep and terrible. One of the things Jung said about human beings as such, and this is the adversarial part of the person. There's a heroic side and there's an adversarial side. He said, all of your moral flaws are like, they're like there's an abyss underneath them. That's where the image of hell comes from. Everything you do that's wrong, morally wrong, is associated with the abyss if you look into it deeply enough. One of the things Jung thought was that if you, and this is also the same with the phenomenologists, by the way, and it's also the same with Viktor Frankl, and I believe it's also the same with Alexander Solzhenitsyn when he wrote about how to stand up against totalitarian states. It's like, you have to maintain an honest relationship with the things that attract your attention. You can't ignore them. If you ignore them, well, what happens? Well, we've already figured that out. You don't fix the holes in your map, and then whenever you wander on that territory, you're going to fall right through. Otherwise, it gets one-sided, like Frozen, which was an absolutely dismal and wretched movie. It was mythology. It was. Disney's pretty good at mythology, but Frozen was pure ideology. So it was very annoying to see that, because in most situations, the Disney movies are pretty good at balancing out the archetypes. So, and that's part of the reason they're so insanely popular. You know, they present an archetypal picture of the world. And the thing is, you say, well, you know, I don't have any religious beliefs. You might say that to yourself. It's like, fine, why do you watch Disney movies? What the hell do you think you're doing in the theater? You don't think that's a religious experience? It's just because you're completely clueless about what religious experiences are. You're watching a bunch of pictures, like they're drawings, you know, they're of things that aren't even real. And then you're just in there, like embedded in there. It's got your imagination. So you say, well, I don't believe in any of that. It's like, yeah, right. Son, come on. You believe in it.
So what you're implying there in religious and about mythology is that they're not real as objects, but they are absolutely real in the world of action. I mean, is that fair?
Basically, yes. But there's a problem underneath that that's even a bit deeper. Because, like, I think the dominance hierarchy is real. Period. Real. But it's not, it's a weird structure, because it's like, you know, it's like the example I gave earlier, where there's the tunnel and the train going through it, and the train keeps, at any moment, the train cars are full of different things. Well, the dominance hierarchy is kind of like that. It's actually a dissipative structure. So a dissipative structure is like a, you know, when you let the water go out of a drain and you get that coil, that funnel? Well, is that a thing? Well, it's a constant across a series of transformations. It's a dissipative structure. And the physicist Schrödinger regarded people as dissipative structures. So, because our structure isn't constant, like, I don't know, you've probably replaced every cell in your body, roughly speaking, or at least the constituent elements of every cell, you know, 2 or 3 times since you've been alive. But there you are. So you're like this thing that's a permanent structure in a flux. And the dominance hierarchy is sort of like that. Because the constituent elements of it keep changing. But its existence is there. And so I don't exactly know what to make of a category like that. Except that I'm certainly going to say that it's real. Or if you don't like that, I can say, I don't care if it's real, because all of you act as if there's nothing that's more real than that. So that'll do for me. Because, you know, that brings up another question. How do you know what someone regards as real? And one answer is, well, you listen to what they say. It's like, no. You watch what they do. That's a much more accurate guide to who they are. Because what do they know about who they are? They got a vague model of who they are, and it's usually hyper-tilted towards banality and conformity and self-protection and deceit and all sorts of things.
The metaphor used by Jesus is the wind. You can't see the wind, but you can see the consequences. You can't even see the hurricane, but you can see the catastrophe that follows.
Well, that like a hurricane is a dissipative structure, so that, you know, that's a reasonable analogy. And the spirit is often likened to the wind. So any other questions? Yes? Yeah. Oh, it's an appalling ideology because the people who created it had the idea about what it should be before they made it. So it's propaganda. You can say exactly what Frozen is about. So it's propaganda. A truly mythologically based story, you can never fully say what it's about. You can just talk about it forever and ever and ever and ever. So it's a wellspring of meaning. So. Oh, sure they are. Of course that's what they're doing. Oh yeah, it's calculated marketing. Yeah. Yeah, sure. It was hyper politically correct. Yeah. And they didn't need men, and God, give me a break. Just because you need men doesn't mean you have to like them. Yeah, so I mean, I've thought a lot about the difference between propaganda and art. So art's actually a process rather than an end product. And with any luck, if you have a piece of art, the process is embedded in the byproduct. And so it reflects the process when you bring it into your house. And so it's a crystallized act of exploration. And the real artist doesn't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. They're exploring. I can recommend a film. There's a film made of Picasso in about 1957. And it was a black and white film. And it was actually a film of him making a painting. And he painted it on glass so you could see what he was doing. It's really quite fascinating because you can see that he's playing. He sketches it in and then he rubs it out. So then he sketches it in again and he rubs it out and he sketches over here. And it's like there's a real dynamism about it. He doesn't plan it out to begin with. Not that there's necessarily anything wrong with that as an artistic endeavor too. But Picasso was trying to explore and understand. And I don't know what you know about Cubism, but Cubism, it's a strange thing. But what he was doing with his Cubism was to try to show you that you only see things from one perspective, but that things exist in multiple perspectives. So, a Cubist painting is your face this way and your face this way at the same time. And so you could say, well, is that a more accurate way of representing a person than just the standard portrait? And Picasso would say, well, in some ways, definitely, because it captures the transformative element rather than the static element. And so someone who's a true artist doesn't have a political message. That's funny because my house is full of ideological propaganda from the Soviet Union. It's just packed full of it. And it's so interesting to watch these artifacts because a lot of them they're socialist realist, although mostly they're impressionist, really. It's so interesting to watch them because in the painting themselves, there's a war that you can perceive. And the war is, a lot of the people who made these paintings were incredibly talented, really, really skilled, because the Russians kept their formal academies open. So the Russians can really paint Impressionism. It's remarkable. But their talents were encapsulated within this mostly Stalinist ideology. And so in each canvas there's this war between the ideological message and the artistic message. And what's so cool is, the farther we get away from the Soviet Union, the more the art wins. Because in 300 years, there isn't going to be a shred left of that ideology. And all that'll be left of the paintings is the art. So, part of the reason that people are so attracted to art is because the artist actually manifests identity with the process of transformation. And so that's why the artist is a cultural hero. That's also why every nihilist worth his salt wants to be an artist. Like, who are you? What are you going to say? I'm a nihilist? No, I'm an artist. It's like, no, you're not, but I can see why you want to be. Right. Yeah, just because you're a failure doesn't mean you're an artist.
Do you find that the struggle between the artist and the state makes the work more interesting, or is the art exciting and interesting in spite of the dynamics?
Well, I think it depends on who you are. Like, it's really interesting to me, but I'm really interested in that. And I'm also interested in the way that ideologies co-opt more fundamental processes to and harness their energy as a rational and motivating force. And so, for me, these pieces of art, propaganda, are extremely interesting. I mean, it's very interesting to be surrounded by them because I can see this war going on all the time. So, it's very cool. And the art's winning, as far as I can tell. So that's very interesting. Because they were pure propaganda, many of them, when I bought them. But it's getting farther and farther away from the Soviet Union. So the more archetypal elements are coming to the forefront. So
I suppose the question was, would it become less interesting once it's gone? Does that narrative seem to close?
I think it would depend on the skill of the artist. You know, and some of these artists are incredibly skilled. So to the degree that there's genuine artistic merit in the painting, regardless of its constraint, that can manifest itself as value. If you love someone, you simultaneously love and accept their fragility. And that means that in some way you actually think it's justifiable. That's what I thought about my son. It's like, no, I think he's fine just the way he is. Like 3 years old, got his problems, you know, certainly gets hurt a fair bit and is probably going to get hurt more, but I'm not trading him in. I like him just the way he is. And so that's like it's a realization of the soul that there's something about the fragility of human life that's actually valuable. And it is the limitation. That's the thing that's so cool about it, is that it's this limitation that we are, because that's what we are, is we're limitation. We're potential conjoined with limitation in some sense. Think, well, we want to get rid of the limitation, but it's not the case. We have to keep the limitation because it's integral to who we are. And so we're in this situation where we have to be limited, and we have to accept it, and we have to confront what's essentially an infinite potential to help us manage it. And I think that's true. And I think that's how we act. I think it's what we expect. I think it's what we need to know. Because you have to say, and that's part of standing up straight, right? And accepting the tragedy and catastrophe of existence. This is partly why I think the West got it right. Because I do think we got it right. The central story, we're a Judeo-Christian culture, and there's a central story at the bottom, and the story is about the radical acceptance of fragility. That's what the crucifixion represents. The fact that that's a voluntary act. And it's about everybody. That's the thing. It's about everybody. It's that, well, you're going to die. You're going to be betrayed. Those are going to happen. And so you can either shrink from that and maybe envelop yourself in bitterness and hatred. And no wonder, no wonder. Or you can say, bring it on. Bring it on. And so I would say, well, I've looked at dark things as much as I can, you know, and I think that's probably hurt me in many ways, but it's been unbelievably helpful, you know, because the thing about darkness is it makes the light stand out. And as I've looked deeper and deeper into terrible things, I've also realized that there's something amazing about human beings. You know, because our lives are bounded by tragedy, and we are capable of deep malevolence. More so than you can almost imagine. But I don't think that's what defines us. I really don't. I think what defines us is the ability to transcend that. I truly believe that. And so I'm not pessimistic, I'm optimistic. You know, and I do believe that people are embodied miracles. I really think that's the right way of thinking about it. And I think we all know this. And what I'm hoping in these polarized times is that we return to that realization, and that we adopt the responsibility of full individual being as an antidote to, well, idiot political polarization, but also as an impetus for us all to move forward into the future. We're in an inflection point, I think, in our culture, in the world. Things are opening up in front of us that have never opened up before. It's very dangerous. Our technological prowess is very dangerous, and things could go very dreadfully wrong. But I don't think they have to. I think they could go extraordinarily right. And I think that each of us, I do believe this, that every single person sitting here, and every single person there is, but every single person sitting here plays a key role in that decision. You know, we're all part of it. We're deeply networked. We all influence everyone else. And we are these divine centers of consciousness that are separate but united at the same time. And the decisions that each of us make as individuals are far more important than we realize. Our lives are ultimately meaningful, I think. And that we do decide whether by our actions we're going to bring a worse or a better cosmos into being. And I would say that we should dispense with our resentment and our bitterness, despite the fact that we have every reason for it, and stand up and face things forthrightly and speak the truth and make the world a better place.